Well, good morning, Southern Oregon, and welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here in John L. Scott in beautiful Southern Oregon, and I will be your host today. And we had another super busy week in housing market here in Southern Oregon. Even though it's Christmas, we still have lots and lots of buyers out there. In fact, we probably have more this week coming into the market than we have had in a couple of months. The sellers are getting their houses on the market finally, and it is reminding us a little bit that sense of early spring. And you've heard me say this the last couple of weeks, but it really is about that busy. So unusual for Southern Oregon, but that's okay. Sellers, you just keep putting your house on the market, and buyers, you just keep buying them, and everybody's happy. One of the things I did want to tell you is that I started running some preliminary numbers for 2021. Now we won't have the final numbers until early January, mid-January. But for 2020 residential sales in Southern Oregon, we had a little over 1,000 transactions. So we're already a little over that here Christmas Day, late December, and we still have another week of closings. And I know many of us are really getting the escrow companies and the lenders, to hurry it up and get those transactions closed and get people moved on to the next step of their life. So very, very interested to see what those final 2021 numbers look like when we report them in early to mid-January. But I'm predicting it'll be a little more than it was last year. And then that would give some weight to this sense that a lot of us have had, that there are more houses to sell and that people do have more inventory to choose from. Not as much as we want, but definitely more than it used to be. But the numbers do the talking, and we'll definitely let you know. In the meantime, we're going to be repeating a fabulous interview by DEQ. We've got Marty Easter, who's a septic specialist for DEQ, one of my favorite people to talk to, and also the public affairs officer, Dylan Darling of DEQ. They're both joining us in this beautifully informative repeat for you to listen to, because there was so much information, including some of the options for homeowners to get funding, loans, that kind of thing, to do septic repairs, to put in a new septic perhaps. And you definitely want to listen to this episode. It was just chock full of great ideas and good information. There's also a lot of points to be made if you live near the river, a stream, or a pond, which is super common in Southern Oregon. So don't touch that dial. We have a great show for you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, season's greetings, joy to all. Well, welcome back, folks, to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm your host here today. I'm a broker at John L. Scott here in lovely but freezing Southern Oregon. And I'm so happy to have two of my favorite gentlemen be guests today from DEQ. That's the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. We have Marty Easter and Dylan Darling. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, good to see you, Alice.
Yeah, well, we've had a kind of a weird year, another one. So we just wanted to check in, recap kind of what's been going on at DEQ for 2021, and maybe talk a little bit about what's coming in 2022.
Sounds good.
So one of the things that people are still struggling with is when they're buying and selling rural property, the septic systems sometimes are not super well maintained. And I think before we got started, Dylan, you were talking about some kind of special help, assistance, financial assistance that homeowners might get now.
Yes, thank you, Alice. And just to introduce myself to your listeners, I'm Dylan Darling, and I'm a public affairs specialist for DEQ. That's basically spokesperson, spokesman. And I cover the Western region, which includes Southern Oregon. So it's really nice to be talking to folks down there. And Marty, I'll give you a quick moment, and then I'll go into this exciting thing I want to talk about. Do you want to introduce yourself a moment?
Definitely. Thanks, Dylan. Marty Easter. I'm the on-site septic inspector, one of them for Jackson County now in Southern Oregon in our DEQ office. And just appreciate the time. Thanks, Alice.
Well, I
Yeah,
know
so
our listeners just love having you guys on. So, okay, back to you, Dylan. Let's talk about what homeowners can do if they don't have enough money.
yeah, so DEQ, there's an affordable loan program, and this is something that we had for a while, from 2016 until it then ran out of funding a couple of years ago, back in 2020. And the good news, some nice good news to share this year, is that the Oregon legislature, they directed some money back toward it. And so $2 million is going to this affordable loan program, which there's then a nonprofit lender called Craft 3, and they handle taking applications and figuring out who might be eligible, actually distributing the funds, and they call it the Clean Water Loans Program. They just started taking applications from anyone around Oregon back on November 1st. And this is for repair or replacement of failing septic systems. As Marty can tell you, as someone who works with these, repairs and replacement can be really expensive. And I can give some more info in a little bit, but a takeaway is if you're interested in learning more and maybe even applying, you can find info at craft3.org/cleanwater, That's clean water ore. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, and that's really nice because I know a lot of people think DEQ is a 3-letter word, and it's really not. You guys are there for the general public. You're there to assist the citizens, the businesses, and this is just another way that state of Oregon is being helpful. So we're super happy to hear about that. And Dylan, you said that was available not only to homeowners, but possibly small businesses.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for asking that, Alice. The small businesses can apply, and these include restaurants, convenience stores, small manufactured home or RV parks, a number of type of small businesses. The key point is you need to be on a septic system. If you supplied by city sewer, unfortunately not available to you, but this can help small businesses along with homeowners.
That's super cool. Super cool. So Marty, thanks for coming back. You're the person that kind of goes out in the field. That's where I usually see you, but why don't you tell our listeners kind of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. And just to tag on to what Dylan said, this affordable loan program we had a couple years ago. It was great, especially for some individuals who have fixed incomes, that all of a sudden, their septic system's now failing. What do? They have some great programs at Craft 3 to be able to help those individuals. I don't know all the specifics. I'm not a loan originator by any means, but give them a call, check them out on the website. And they are pretty quick and really easy to work with. So I've seen a lot of people be helped by this in Southern Oregon. So in the past, so excited to have them back. But my day-to-day can be a wide variety. If it's snowing, like today, you said, Alice, it's freezing. It was snowing today, and it usually forces me inside because the majority of my time I spend out in what we call soil test pits. And these test pits are roughly 4 to 5 feet deep, 2 feet wide. And we go in there on sites that are either bare land looking for septic approval, or could have, like we were just talking about, a repair that's needed. And so we go out and look at the soil types, the water table, and based on that, put those factors into our rule, and then be able to tell what type of system they need to put in, and how big of a drain field, how big of a septic tank, all those things go into that. So that's what a majority of my time is spent doing. There's always the technical assistance. If you have a question, you can for sure call our office, and ask, and we'll be able to help out.
So I have a question about the soil. Like when you're in those test pits, what is it? Why does it matter what kind of soil? What is the difference?
Yeah, great question. I always say, especially when I'm in a test pit and there's maybe a property owner looking down going, what are you doing? Why am I paying you to do this? I say, well, we've all been to the beach, hopefully, and we've all seen how water will go through sand, right? Goes
Right.
through sand pretty quickly. We've also seen clay, there'd be clay pots or other things like that. Water's just not going to go through those. So all soil is made up of sand particles, clay particles, and a silt particle. That silt is kind of the medium range in between sand and clay. And so we're basing that and saying what type of soil that we find in the test bed with a field test. And based on that, we can tell with fairly accurate findings what type of soil is in this test pit. If it's really clayey, we're going to make the drain fields a bit bigger because it's going to take longer for that soil to perk through this, or the effluent to perk through the soil.
Oh, so it's kind of the absorption, the ability of the soil to absorb.
Yeah, we definitely want the effluent to go down, right? Be treated by the soil, have those microbes and bacteria that's in the soil already, be able to treat the effluent before it gets back to the water table.
Okay, so if you have a lot of clay in your soil, then are you saying that you're going to extend the drain field so that it has more just like linear feet?
Yeah, that's great. Yep, exactly. If you have a certain type of soil, like a clayey soil, we're going to want to spread that drain field out. And that usually means an additional linear footage like you're talking about. And sometimes it does also mean pre-treatment before, if we don't have enough either usable area or the clay is just too thick to treat the effluent. And that advanced treatment, or the pre-treatment unit, sometimes called a sand filter or an ATT.
Oh, I did not realize. I feel like such a dork. Because I sell properties with these. So sand filters are considered pre-treatment. And you
Yes.
recommend those when the soil absorption, is that kind of what that's all about? You don't
Yeah,
have adequate
you know,
soil absorption?
yep. There's a couple different factors, but some of the main ones we see in Jackson County for sure are, in Sam's Valley area, Eagle Point, Ashland, there's some pretty thick clays, like some of the worst in the state.
I did not know that. So we're kind
Yeah.
of famous.
Yeah, there's some specific rules in the rules.
Southern Oregon clay.
That's it. And so in those cases, when we find that, the effluent just would not be taken in by the ground, and the system would fail pretty quickly. And so we have this pre-treatment, this ATT or a sand filter, placed right after a septic tank to help with that treatment of the effluent, and then make it easier for the soil to be able to handle that.
Wow, that's interesting. It's like when you have dirty laundry. Well, maybe
For
not.
sure.
That's not a very good example. Sorry.
No, yep.
Okay, so what if you have like really super sandy, quickly absorbing soil, the exact opposite? What's that like?
Great question. Yep. And I know a lot of river properties are like this.
Are
Right?
they?
A lot of river properties will have what we call rapidly draining soil. That can also be a problem, right? If you have too much effluent going through too quickly to the water table, not getting enough time to be treated by the soil, that could be a potential issue too. So in some of these areas where we have rapidly draining soil, we'll actually upsize the drain field as well and be able to spread that out a little quicker. So it's going to still probably go down pretty quickly, but we're not going to have a really concentrated area.
So, okay. So the solution in both cases is a bigger drain field. That's kind of interesting.
Yep, usually, and usually the clays are going to be much bigger than the rapidly draining, but we do upsize like one step for the rapidly draining soils.
Yeah,
and that's it. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that's, it's all site specific. There could be wells on properties also, and there could be other limiting factors. How close to the river are you? That would determine what type of system you get. So everything is different. But yeah, that's why we go out and do those site inspections, is to find out what all the limiting factors are.
Yeah. So if you have real sandy soil, you said overly quickly absorbing, what else do you do to slow it down? Or is it only adding feet to the drain field?
It's usually just adding feet to the drain field, but if there really isn't a way to stay separated from wells, from rivers, from other things, then we're going to want to do a pre-treatment there as well, to pre-treat the effluent.
I
put
see.
An ATT, or even still some technology today is a bottomless sand filter. So it would go through the sand filter, and then instead of getting out to a drain field after that, like a lot of sand filters, it would just continue on through back to the water table. So interesting.
Okay, a bottomless
sand filter.
Okay, well, we have to
exactly
take a quick break, but we're going to talk more about bottomless sand filters. I don't know that any of us have heard about that. That's an interesting concept. So, folks, we're going to have to take a quick break. A word from our sponsors. We're talking to Marty Easter and Dylan Darling of DEQ. Do not touch that dial. We'll be right back with more of the Real Estate Show. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, everybody. I'm Alice Lema, broker here at John L. Scott in Southern Oregon. And we have a very lively, interesting conversation going with two of our favorite DEQ, State of Oregon Department of Environmental Quality representatives. We've got Dylan Darling, Public Affairs Officer, and Marty Easter, who's the guy you see in the field in the test pits. So great combo. Thank you again, gentlemen, for being on. Before the break, we were talking about a couple of different things. So we're kind of talking about problems and soil. And during the break, Dylan, you mentioned that some of this loan money we'd referred to can help people when they have some of these repairs to do. You want to circle back and bring us up to speed on those?
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting, I yielded to Marty because he's the expert on septic, but just learning about so many things that can go into these systems, I almost got a little bit of an idea, especially if someone was a new homeowner and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with septic? And these loans that I mentioned, the affordable loans, that it's money from DEQ, but being distributed by Craft 3. It's not just for like in the ground work. The loans can actually also go or help cover the costs of permitting and design, and potentially some of these others. You can go onto the Craft 3 website and find out more information, but it can just help with all these other things associated with a septic system.
I don't think people realize it's not just the actual tank or system. You've got all these other outside peripheral expenses and permits. Permits can be kind of pricey, especially if you're not ready for your system to break. Who's ready?
I think no.
Yeah. And then the design, like what is involved in the design exactly? I've never had to do that. So
yeah.
Is that an expensive thing?
Could be, for sure. Different installers will charge different amounts, obviously. Kind of depends on the type of system, and then how complex it's going to be. So yeah, I don't know exact prices because everyone's probably going to be a little bit all over the place, but yeah, getting those initial plans drawn up is not free usually. So that's great, the thing that Dylan just talked about with the loan program there to help out with, like what you said, Alice, some of those unforeseen, almost hidden costs where you're like, oh, I got to pay for this too. Great.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's not just people who are in the process of buying, it's for people who think they might want to sell. And sometimes people don't even check their septic for the whole 40 years they live there. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, maybe I should take a peek. And then they find out there's a problem.
Definitely. Yeah. I hear stories. Sometimes they're bragging, even though I don't think they should be, about, I've lived here for 30 years and I've never had my septic tank pumped.
Oh,
That's not a great thing. You should be,
nothing to be proud of.
no, you should be having those at least checked every 3 to 5 years, if not fully pumped out and starting over. I've heard some pretty bad horror stories from pumpers that we talked to about almost having to like jackhammer into septic tanks because they're so
Oh,
hard. And I know we probably don't want to listen to that, but
yeah.
it happens, and people are, I can get this way sometimes too. It's in the ground, you don't see it. As long as it keeps working, that's all we care about. But just having a little bit of maintenance on these goes a long way, and making sure that your septic system's working. So getting with a pumper, here's my plea. If you haven't and you're listening, you haven't done it for 5-10 years, just, we have a lot of great pumpers in the valley, and give them a call. They'll be able to help you get back on track. So
Before it's an emergency.
before it's Christmas and you have all the family over and now you have a puddle out in your front yard, and yeah, I've heard a lot of stories. So
Oh, yeah. Well, and a lot of us country people, we've had it happen. We've been at
Mhm.
somebody's house when it all went sideways
Yep.
or backwards.
Yep.
Yeah.
On
So
that,
that's super exciting. Dylan, I wanted to ask, the money that DEQ is providing to Craft 3, how did that idea come about? Because I thought I heard you say it's something we were doing before and then stopped. So like, how did this all get started so that homeowners had some affordable loans to go to?
Yeah, so Craft 3, they have offices in Oregon and Washington. And so they initially had done a program like this up in Washington. And
Uh-huh.
so then I don't know the exact ins and outs, but it was successful up in Washington. And so then it came to be in Oregon as well. And like with the offices here, they have them in Astoria, Bend, Klamath Falls, and Portland. And so they have them all around the state. And just, yeah, Oregon kind of learned from what the Craft 3 did up in Washington.
Oh, that's very cool. And it's $2 million recently funded. Craft 3 is doing the distribution. DEQ ponied up the money. So thank you for that. And then the kind of repairs and different systems we were talking about before the break, a bottomless sand filter.
Yeah.
Did I hear you
Sounds-
right?
Yep, you did. Sounds
Yes.
fancy,
So
right?
say that again. So tell us what that is again, exactly.
Yeah,
It doesn't sound
exactly.
good.
It's okay. Yeah, it has a good spot for it. But yeah, a lot of times people are familiar with sand filters. It's a bit of an older technology, but was first on the scene. And I've said ATT a couple times. That stands for Advanced Treatment Technology. It's basically an off-the-shelf proprietary sand filter that's already made. It usually comes in like a plastic box that goes right after the septic tank.
Is that more
And so
current? Is that like more current
yeah,
technology, newer?
yeah,
Okay.
more current technology. I'll be honest, if someone needs an ATT or a sand filter, I would say they put in about 98% of the time they're going to go with an ATT.
Oh, okay.
Costs are about the same. And it's getting harder and harder to find clean material to meet the sand filter specs.
Because you kind of have to
It can't-
build a sand filter, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this will get back to your question. If you're familiar with sand filters at all, or if you're not, it's basically a box that is, I'm going to oversimplify this, it's filled with sand. And this sand or the effluent is essentially sprayed over the top of this sand. And the effluent goes through the sand and gets cleaned up as it goes. And then there's a perforated pipe at the bottom of this sand filter, which usually will go out to a drain field from there. And it's received pre-treatment, like we talked about before it gets out to the drain field, cleans up the effluent quite a bit. But yeah, it's a contained box with usually has vinyl siding in it, and not like the siding on your house, but like a plastic coating, a plastic sheet that kind of keeps everything in, right? And if you
Uh-huh.
go driving around, especially in the country, you may see these little humps of soil
Yep.
out there, usually
Yep.
in
Little
people's front
berms.
yards. Yeah, little berms.
Little
Usually
berms.
people don't like them, but that's all that there was, back in the 90s when the majority of these went in. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what those are usually. Maybe another little plug. If you buy something and you don't know what that berm is, don't jump your motorcycle over it. 'Cause I've seen that a couple times, and it's a great jump for sure, but you want to stay off it. So that's a sand filter. A bottomless sand filter is just that. It's a sand filter that only has walls on the side, does not have a bottom. These are put in areas, like we've said a couple times here, maybe along a river property, where the soil is rapidly draining, and as it does the same thing, goes to a septic tank, gets pumped over onto the top of the sand filter, the effluent sprayed over that and goes down and gets treated, except this one doesn't have a bottom. There's nothing to stop it, and it just continues on through the soil
So is this more
until
like
it,
a vertical installation, like straight up and down, not going wide? Is that
yeah,
what you're talking
they
about?
all yeah, they all have to be at minimum for a 4-bedroom sizing, which is the usual size we size everything for. They're going to look the exact same. They're going to be 360 square feet, and whether it's a bottomless or not a bottomless, except there's just no drain field after it, and so it's going to continue on down. They range in size from, depending on how deep they can get in the ground, 4 feet to maybe 2 feet. But we have some
Oh,
pretty good diagrams if anyone ever has questions about how this is going to be constructed. And the installers know how this is supposed to be constructed as well. It's a big lift though. I still remember a couple years back there was an installer who kept putting in sand filters quite a bit, and he always had his his laborer who would be actually not in the excavator, the backhoe. And so he went on a hunting trip, and the owner of the business had to construct the sand filter. After that, he said,
can you
never
do
again.
that? I didn't think homeowners were allowed to do that
But
anymore.
this was an installer who was doing it. But
Oh,
he said, I'll never do it again. It was such backbreaking work
oh.
compared to an ATT that just basically comes off of a flatbed truck, gets put in the ground, plugged in, and you're pretty much ready to go.
Well, and it's faster
Um,
too, because homeowners are sitting there tapping their fingers because either they don't have a
Absolutely.
potty that works or they can't finish the next round of the house construction. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's also additional inspections that go with sand filters. We want to check the box, make sure that they're using the correct material as they go.
mhm.
Where there just isn't that for the ATT. It's like I said, a much quicker process.
So, what difference does it make when you're in a different climate? Because you guys are up by Eugene, Salem, and it's a different weather pattern than we have here. Does that weigh into what kind of design somebody might get?
Not yet. There's been thought of basing systems based on weather pattern. I mean, even if you stay here in the Southern Oregon, obviously on the coast, it rains a lot.
Yeah.
As you move towards Cave Junction, it rains a little less, but then as you get to Grants Pass, even a little less than that. And by the time you make it over here, a little past Gold Hill, we're only getting 18 to 20 inches of rain on average a year,
Mm-hmm.
and that's way different than a majority of the western part of the state. Like Dillon's up in Eugene, they get way more rain than we do here. So yeah, it definitely factors in. We have some different types of systems, like I talked about um, it's called vertisol clay. They're really sticky clay that has a specific precipitation requirement in the rule. So it has to be below a certain amount per year. And we fall into that kind of sweet spot. So
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm sorry we have to take another break, but we're going to be right back. We're talking to Dylan Darling and Marty Easter of DEQ. Lots of great information. We're going to cover some more topics here in just a quick minute. We're brought to you by John L. Scott of Medford Ashland, the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Guy Giles Mutual of Omaha Mortgage. We'll be right back. Do not touch that dial. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema, broker John L. Scott in Southern Oregon, your host today. And we're talking to Marty Easter and Dylan Darling of DEQ. And I wanted to ask you, Dylan, why does DEQ care what we do on our land?
Well, thank you, Alice. Yes, DEQ as an agency, our whole mission is protecting air, land, and water. And so when we talk about septic systems, there's a pretty clear connection between a good functioning septic system and water quality. You know, Marty a couple times has talked about properties close to a river, and you can just imagine if you have an issue with a septic system and it's getting into a nearby river or creek, there can be problems with nitrates and fecal bacteria, a bunch of stuff you don't want to have in a river. And so DEQ cares about it because addressing septic systems helps protect public health and addresses threats to water quality. And so we just really want to make sure people have functioning systems. It is kind of unique because it's up to individual homeowners and small businesses, people like that, taking care of their own systems. Marty touched on the importance of pumping. We just don't want finances to be the reason that you're not doing these things. And so that's why there's something like these Craft 3 clean water loans that I've been continually mentioning. We just want to get that word out. But, just really want to make sure people don't put this off.
Yeah, and you're not the bad guys. And I know it must be so hard. I don't know how you guys do what you do every day, but I'm glad you do. And you're there to help the public be safe and also help the environment be safe. So, yeah. And I know some people think like, well, you're just in the way. You're in the way of my house.
So. I think Dylan brings up a great point, and you as well, Alice, of, I live here. I have kids in school here. We're going to run into each other at the grocery store, and other things. And I mean, it's always been my personal goal to try to help people as much as possible. It's usually a horrible time. Luckily, I've never been in a failed septic system, my personal home, but it's a horrible time. And so we're usually stepping in at the time when people are flustered, maybe not being able to shower or do dishes. And I completely understand that. So yeah, a lot of times we get people who are maybe a tad grumpy, but I understand that. It's a tough time.
Oh, it's
and so
very
we're trying
stressful.
to get
yeah.
So stressful. And in this time that we already live in, where everyone's already stressed, totally understand that. So we're here to help. And I know that our office and our front office does an amazing job at trying to help, whether it's helping you get your application through, finding septic system records online, whatever they can do to help. We're here for that.
Yeah, I'm always so impressed, not only how calm everybody is on your end, because that is an art in those situations with the public, but also how genuinely quickly you can help us navigate, like you said, through the application process. There's drawings you have to do, there's reports, there's all this stuff, and I just don't think people are prepared. And then a lot of that could have been prevented if you just pumped and inspected every 5 years.
Yep.
Well, you said 3.
3 to 5 is the average. If there's if you have a lot of, like, I have a buddy who it's him, his wife, and he has 5 girls. 3 of them are teenagers. He gets his checked once or twice a year, 1 or 2 years because of the
Wow.
additional usage. You're going to have
Yeah.
more. Now, if it's just, grandma and grandpa in a house, maybe it's closer to 5, 6, but at least being on some sort of schedule to have it checked. Yeah, I think you're
Mhm.
100% right.
Yeah.
And I'll point out with this ongoing pandemic and people working from home, it might be like a lot of things, like all of a sudden, oh, hey, the power bill's a little higher than it used to be, but you're, running computers there all the time. Your septic system might be getting more use than
I didn't even
it
think of
typically
that.
had.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right when the pandemic started, I was talking to some of the installers and they're like, we're almost overrun because we used to, mom and dad used to go to work, kids would go to school, now everyone's at home. It's a great point, Dylan.
So that's like 100% increase in usage then, right? If
Yeah,
they're
I mean,
gone 8 to 12 hours a day.
yeah, it was a ton of usage and a lot of septic systems that were a little older that were maybe right on the breaking point. We saw a lot of repairs that were needed in that
Wow.
time.
All at the same time. I didn't even think of that. Wow.
Yep, great
So,
point.
what other ways did the pandemic affect like DEQ in general? Did your call rate go up? Did you have more applications?
It was a pretty normal year for applications. I will say that thrown in there was also the fires, right, with
Oh,
Alameda
right.
Absolutely.
and the one up in Eagle Point. And a majority of the homes in the Alameda fire were on set or sewer system. So, but there were on the peripheries, the individuals who were right outside of town where their homes burned down. And we were on quite a few sites trying to help out as much as we can to get them rebuilt, especially up along like Butte Falls Highway. There was just all these homes right in a row that were wiped out. And so they had to go in and first inspect, make sure that the septic system is okay. Or if it wasn't, then they had to put in a new septic system.
Well, and
So
I don't want to sound dumb,
ooh,
but like, does fire damage a septic system?
it can, yeah. If you think about all the components, a lot of them are pretty much, plumbing grade, plastic pipes. A
Oh,
lot of
gotcha.
the ATTs are plastic as well on the outside. And so if a fire goes over those, I've seen a lot of them that were melted.
Oh,
And
wow.
so the pipes are usually only, 24 inches in the ground. And so if it gets super hot, I even heard about up north a sand filter that a fire crew was cutting a fire line, went right through a sand filter. And so maybe it wasn't the fire per se, but your system is not going to be functioning now. And so luckily I didn't have to deal directly with that. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that happens with fires as well that we were greatly impacted with this past year.
So, what about all the water, the rain and the
Mhm.
snow that we're getting? We've only got a little over a minute left, but let's talk about the current weather pattern we've got right now.
Yeah, you want to, real basic, you want to make sure that you keep as much water off your drain field as possible. That goes for irrigating, for sprinklers. So when you get these heavy rain events like this, you want to be careful, you want to be watchful. In Southern Oregon, like I said, we usually don't get a lot, especially the last couple of years. But just be real careful. Notice what happens after some of these events. Make sure that you're paying attention.
So go out
Um,
and look and see if there's like
yeah,
standing water.
yeah, standing water, you can usually smell it. A predecessor once said, maybe this will be our final sign off, called it the old stomp and sniff inspection. So do that. That's not technical at all, but go out there. Are there squishy areas where your drain field's at? Does it smell? That's probably a bad sign.
Well, I
Okay.
can't beat Stomp and Sniff, but I will just remind you
No.
of
We'll have to get a t-shirt.
craft3.org/clean water ORE, and craft is spelled with a C and the number 3. But yeah, please check out that website if you want more info about those loans.
Thank you, gentlemen. Dylan, Darlene, Marty, Easter, DEQ. Have beautiful holiday, gentlemen. We'll get you next year.
Thank
Miss
you
Alice
too.
Lema is saying bye now.
Likewise, thanks, Alice.
Yeah.